How was your day today?
Good. Okay, I think we're actually live.
I love it.
All right. So I'm pulling up my live stream on my computer and we're there. So according to
See.
YouTube, we're live. And if anybody's out there, hello. I'd love to hear
Greetings and
from
salutations.
any comments. I heard, Jason, that someone from New Zealand said they were probably going to watch us tonight.
Oh, I love it.
So they're actually they're not watching us tonight. They're watching us tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Let me get a
so this is
popcorn thing real
actually a
quick.
morning show for some people and
Let's
an
say
evening show
morning,
for others. Yeah.
morning from America. Hold on one second.
That's right.
I'll
So,
stay
oh,
page.
okay, Dak O'Brien's back on. Hello, Dak. I don't recall if Dak told us where he was from. Dak O'Brien, where are you from? It'd be good to hear where they're from. And I think also some people from Kenya are going to join us as well. Yes,
Man,
I'm seeing some live.
we're
Got RZ,
international.
got Adam.
Hey,
Nice. Jason will make sure to respond and say hello. Are you going to start arguing with people in the
I'm gonna
comments
argue with them right
today?
now. I'm gonna argue with Adam
Good.
right now.
Start an argument right now. All right.
That'd be cool.
So, first thing we want to ask everybody is how is Jason's volume? So, Jason, I don't know, just say something so that they can hear you and tell us
All
if you can
right.
hear Jason.
All right. Well, my name is Jason. I live here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Tim's tag along. My kid is Robin. He's Batman, so forth like that. How do I sound, people?
All right. So, we'll probably get some feedback on that. I can hear Jason well on my end, but last week we noticed that the live stream, he didn't sound very loud. So let us know if you're not hearing anybody well. Oh,
Yes.
great to see all these commenters. Great to have you join us, Teresa, RZ, Adam. I probably mentioned some of these names before,
Yeah.
but that's great. Great to have you. And I think one person here is from Alberta. So we've got Canada joining us again. Hello to Canada.
I mean,
I'm
Canada.
up in New Hampshire, by the way, in case anybody didn't know. So I'm not too far from Canada. But speaking of Canada, Jason, the Phillies tomorrow are going to start a series against the Toronto Blue Jays.
I
And the
love it.
Phillies
I
are my
love it.
favorite team. So I will try to love my enemies and still be friends with people who like the Blue Jays.
Well, you got a pretty nice comment about the Blue Jays. Not everybody supports the Blue Jays up there.
Oh, yeah,
In that
that's
last
true.
comment, that's
That's
true.
true. Well, I think of Canada as being more of a hockey place, even more than a baseball place.
Okay.
So I think that that might be one thing. But yeah, and also Toronto is just one spot in Canada, and Canada's huge. So I would
Yes.
imagine there's probably people who like ball teams from, they like different ball teams.
I
Anyway,
love it. I love it.
we're going to talk about tonight or today, depending on where you are. If I can, oh,
Be all
that's going to be
inclusive.
the wrong article that comes up at first, but I'll try to switch it here. That's probably not what I wanted. Let's see if I can get it here. Uh, of course, when I need it, I can't find what I'm looking for. What I wanted to
Okay.
show though is we're going to talk tonight about Artur Pawlowski a little bit, that
Hmm.
whole situation, and I don't see it, but I'm going to try to find it. I had a article that talked about his arrest. So yeah, I'll try to pull that up. But we are going to talk about Artur Pawlowski. We might also get to talking a little bit about Mark Driscoll and
Okay.
a situation that was written about with him. And Mark Driscoll, he's been kind of a controversial figure for quite a while. But there might actually be some overlap in some of the themes that we talk about with Pastor Pawlowski and Mark Driscoll, believe it or not. There's actually sometimes some overlap when you're talking about two different topics. Not that Mark Driscoll's been arrested, but
Right.
but it's just interesting to me to think about leaders and kind of the personalities that they have. It's very interesting. All right. So Jason, why don't you give some shout outs? Where else are people from? And I'm going to try to pull up the articles I was looking for.
Oh, not a problem. So of course we got our people from South California. Got somebody in Massachusetts. Dak is actually from Massachusetts. Alberta, Canada as well. Let's see, where else are these people from? Where is everybody from? And of course, Atlanta, Georgia. But please tell us where else are you all from if I'm missing anybody.
All right. Well, thank you for your patience with us, everyone. We've kind of just been letting everybody get online here with us. And it's great to see so many people from different places. Keep the comments going because it really helps us to know what you guys are thinking. And if you have comments you want to make about what we're talking about, and if you have questions you want to put out there for us to discuss, we will try to observe what you are putting in the comments. If you want to tell me what a good point I made, feel free to put that in the comments. So here I did finally get it up. It's the article here, and there's actually a little video here that's with it. But this is a clip here where you can see Pastor Pawlowski being arrested. One thing that I noticed is that when he was arrested, wasn't very cooperative. They were actually having to kind of pick him up to get him to go with them. And as you can see, he's kneeling. So he wasn't very cooperative. Does that surprise you, Jason?
Not a bit, but to me, the way that the Canadian police went about this process, to me, did not seem as genuine as we're just trying to arrest somebody who's breaking the law. I mean, they literally pulled this guy over in the middle of the road. I think it could have been done so much, since it's not a violent crime, since it's not a gentleman that has a propensity of, gun violence or drugs or anything of that nature. I think this could have been handled so much more differently without being demonstrative. So basically, I don't care what he did. I think they were wrong. So they were already wrong to start with. So if he kneeled, if he made it difficult for them, I'm not mad at him because they were already doing the most. But I'm going to side with Pastor Pawlowski here. And I just don't think, I think it could have been done differently. So.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people will agree with you. Some people are going to say that, out of submissiveness to the authorities, he should just, go with them and not be so resistant. But one of the things we've pointed out repeatedly is that he did come from a communist background. He was under a communist regime in Poland years ago. And so that definitely impacts probably the way that he thinks about things and the way that he handles things. But also you're dealing with different personalities. And one thing about Pastor Pawlowski, I don't know a lot about him, but I get the sense that he is one of those personalities that he tends to be a very take charge leader type person. So that can be good. It can be a strength. And we're going to share in a little bit here what our thoughts are on the whole situation. I do see someone here saying he should never have been arrested. So that's kind of agreeing with you there, Jason. Yeah, that's from Teresa. And thank you, Dorina, for saying, giving your blessing there and for thanking us. It's great to hear someone, and she's out in Sacramento, California.
Sacramento, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So keep your comments and questions coming. And I kind of already, shared a little bit in my last video about how I think about the situation at this point with Pastor Pawlowski. And I have to say, not every situation is the same. Pastor Pawlowski is a little bit different, for example, than Pastor James Coates in the way Pastor James Coates has gone about things. But a really sad thing is that even with Pastor James Coates, who, was, I would say, not combative really from what I've seen, he still ended up going to jail, and their church was fenced off, completely barricaded, and so that the building was closed down, Grace Life Church. So these are just, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add, James Coates surrendered himself. He walked into the police station on his own. They still shackled him. They still put him in solitary confinement. They still put him in a maximum security jail, as if, again, he was some kind of villain and some kind of evildoer. I mean, far above, because I want to talk about, well, you know what I'm going to talk about, so I'm going to save that,
yeah,
the plot twist for a second. But I just think that Canada's being inconsistent. Usually I try to address my comments directly to people groups within our listening audience. So I'm speaking directly today to our Romans 13 people who say that, you know, the pastors should submit to the government. I want to speak directly to you all who hold that viewpoint. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I do want to address some concerns that I have about that idea that we should unadulteratedly, unequivocally, without questioning, surrender and submit to the government no matter what. I just have some questions that I want to pose. So we'll continue on.
Yeah, actually, I'd like you to start sharing pretty soon here and get into some of your thoughts that you have. But you're right. That is one of the major responses to this is Romans 13, which talks about submitting to the governing authorities. And also Peter, for example, talks about honoring and obeying the authorities and honoring the king, yes, or the emperor. And so, yeah, the scripture does talk about that. I have to say, Jason, I read a comment that I thought was a little off, actually, where they said the only government you need to obey is a government ordained by God. And I think what they were implying is that, you know, if you have a government like in Canada that's doing what it's doing, it's not ordained by God, therefore you don't need to be obeying it. I don't know, just the way that was put, I don't quite think I would put it that way. I wouldn't put it that way. But the thing is, when Paul gave that admonition, Romans 13, he was talking about, you know, a Roman context, as well as Peter. You know, that was not a perfect government, you know, and it was not even a God-honoring government. And yet they said it was ordained by God. Yeah. So I think we have to flesh that out a little bit more. So why don't we get into it? What do you say to the Romans 13 people, Jason?
Well, to just piggyback off of what you said, Acts 5:29 kind of disagrees with what they were saying, what the person said, that we should only follow God, what we feel are God-ordained governments. And that's Peter talking to the Sanhedrin. It says, but Peter and the apostles answered, we must obey God rather than men. So there's going to be a conflict between God's law and man's rule or man's law. There's going to be a conflict, but we should always choose God's law. So, and I think we see that perfectly if we follow the James Coates situation. You know, he says it in his sermon, like, I know I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I'm going to still do what God says. So I think we have to be mindful that, so to my Romans 13 people, I agree, we should follow the law. I should not drive 100 miles per hour down a residential street. I should not. And if I'm caught doing that, if they throw the book at me, if they take my license, my car, and all that, I deserve that because that's breaking the law. On the same note, if they tell me not to go to church and I go to church, then I recognize that what they told me was not good. I recognize that what they told me was not in line with what God has ordained for me as a member of the body of Christ. So I'm just going to accept what they're doing, because later on we'll talk about how one province in Canada was giving out tickets as people left church, and there were some exorbitant amount of tickets for people attending church. Well, okay, I guess you got a ticket. I guess I'll get a ticket next week too. I mean, or a carpool, maybe about Uber. I don't know, but I'm still going to still follow God. So we can't just say, to my Romans 13 people, we can't just say without question that government should always be followed, because the scriptures don't support that idea. I mean, we see civil disobedience in the scriptures all the time in multiple places. So we can't just say, oh, if man says don't do this, I shouldn't. We should weigh it, of course. Like, for example, if man says that 25 miles is the proper speed limit in a school zone with the lights flashing, I'm going to follow that rule. I'm not going to drive around a school bus when the school bus stop sign is out there. Because there's good reason for that. But for them to say that you cannot attend church, you can't sing in church, you can't, no, that's not God ordained law or God honoring. So here we go.
Yeah. So you're right. Those are some important things. You have to take a lot of what the scripture says and begin to piece it together, and also look at how the Christians in the scripture lived out what they were talking about. So sometimes when you read Paul, you get the impression that he's saying one thing, but when you actually read in Acts how he carried some of those things out, you do see Paul sometimes in some situations. For example, he definitely got in trouble with the law. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't always following every single thing that people wanted him to do, But I'm glad that you corrected yourself, Jason. I know we're both getting a lot of lessons on Canadian terminology, as well as the government structure there. And we appreciate people that are teaching us about the different places and the systems in different countries. I do want to just say, on behalf of Americans, we struggle to even understand our own system. So don't take it personally if we don't understand yours, right? But I do see someone had mentioned here that I think it was in Alberta, they were at Costco. This is RZ wrote this, and there were at least 100 people, maybe more, I think they said. And yet they're only letting 15 people inside church buildings. So I think they're pointing out, which just really seems like an inconsistency there.
Right. And I'm with RZ. Like, I'm not saying that going to a supermarket is not important. That's fine. But I also see that being a member of a church is equally as important. Again, like the supermarket, they tried that here in Atlanta initially, and it was embarrassing. Like, come on, for real. They had lanes. You could go up this aisle, but you had to come down another aisle. It was crazy. And I'm glad they got rid of that, because it just wasn't conducive. But on the same note, let people go to church.
Yeah. So what do you think about a church having an aisle with an arrow going one way and an arrow going the other way?
Hey, you know what? My church, we have 18 rows on both sides. The first 9, we call those shoulder to shoulder. So we already know families spend time together. If the Frisch family wants to sit with the Whitaker family, they can sit on that row, just shoulder to shoulder, no problem. The back 9, we call it the physical distancing row. We only can have so many people, and we sort it out. And it works fine. And you can only go in one aisle, and you can go, it works fine, and people enjoy it. And at the current moment, we're still doing it. I think eventually we'll do away with the physical distancing altogether. But that works.
Yeah. I'm reading a comment here. Just thought I'd mention it. It says, do you think Paul was talking about secular non-denominational law? I think that's a better interpretation. What do you think? So I'm not sure I really understand that question. Secular law. Yeah,
I mean, it's like government.
I think he might be asking us to clarify what we mean, but I would think that there are some laws, like you mentioned. For example, I would consider the speed limit a secular law, and I think we should consider those speed limits and not just drive however we want to. Although I'm not going to say I'm always below the speed limit, because to be honest, I'm not.
Do I need to do a citizen's arrest? On you?
No, okay. I'm just being honest.
All right. We'll get it together, man. Get it together. Well, hey, look, we're in Georgia, so trust me, we have no no stones to throw as it relates to driving.
That's right.
We drive extremely fast here.
Yeah.
So Dak was asking about regular government law. And I think Dak, for the most part, I think I feel comfortable in saying that, except for what we've experienced in this most recent time, I think we all would have felt comfortable in saying, yeah, you just follow the law. If the government says it, you should feel comfortable and safe in doing it. Now, I think we should definitely take everything with a grain of salt. I'm just saying, if the government says don't do something, and it's just grossly inconsistent, that's the problem that we're expressing here for our brothers and sisters in Canada, is that we're talking about a lot of inconsistency. Again, churches can't meet, but spoiler alert, mosques can still meet. What is that? And Costco can still meet. Like that, come on. Like what it does seem like it's an unequal weight and measure, which is an abomination to the Lord. So you're not meting out the same rules to everybody. Mosques are not being met with the same kind of punishment, and Costco and Home Depots are not being met with the same kind of punishment that churches are being met with. So that's unequal, it's unbalanced. And that's why. So I think in a regular situation, we would. Now I think we do need to start asking some more questions.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is not so much that we no longer are trying to honor the government. I would say I always bring it back to where you live, even in the United States, does make a difference. Mm-hmm. Where I live in New Hampshire, they've been very reasonable and, actually relatively consistent. So I'm not having the same kinds of issues necessarily that I've heard about in some places in Canada, like we just read in that comment, or you were just talking about, Jason. So I think your particular context does make a difference. I want to make a comment too. Is something that came to my mind that I've been thinking about. I've just noticed, this is just an observation. It's not really like deep theological, but I noticed that really it comes down to fear. And I may have mentioned this before to you, Jason, but there are some people who are more fearful of COVID, and there are some people who are more fearful of the government and what the government will do. And the truth is, both fears, are understandable. And so I try to be understanding of both sides. But at the same time, I do think we also have to distinguish what is a law and what is the government saying this is the law, and what are, for example, health orders that end up getting taken to court, and sometimes they're not even enforced because they're not really, written in the law. So there is a distinguishing there.
And let's take that a little bit further. Even in Canada, as I understand it, AHS is making the laws or the mandates or the rules. They're not even elected officials. So they like the power that they elected, John and Sally. They elected them to be their representatives. John and Sally have abdicated all their power and responsibility over to AHS, who nobody elected, nobody approved of these people. And now they're making laws, and they're able to, they have, if I understand it correctly, the full power of the police. They're able to erect fences around churches and such like that, and give out tickets and arrest people. I mean, that's a lot of power to give to an entity that we, the people, did not elect. So I think there's a little bit more to it than that. Yeah. I mean, a little bit more to consider as well.
Yeah. And I get back to the government we have, and I've said it before, is a government that has a constitution that is supposed to protect, for example, religious liberty. That's inherent. We are given the acknowledgement in our government. It's an acknowledgement of these rights that we have. And so they're supposed to protect those rights. And when they're not doing that, we need to be concerned if they're not doing that. And it's been good to see that the Supreme Court is, I think more and more seeking to uphold that, particularly in the current situation right now with COVID. Yes. But anyway, but before we drag on too long, Jason, I want to make sure you get to all the things you wanted to say and make sure we let you say everything you want to say here. There are still people commenting and a lot of agreeing with us. So I like to see that. Thank you for agreeing with us. But if you do have a point of disagreement or a question or anything, feel free to put that in there.
Well, I just wanted to point out just again that there's a lot of, to the point that I do believe we should respect the government. And I do believe that all governments, whether they are tyrannical or very people centric, have been placed there by God. God has put that there for whatever reason He has saw fit. So I'm not saying just be a rebel against the government without any question. I am saying though, let's just look at this. There is a level of inconsistency, I believe, that should be addressed. As I mentioned before, not all religious institutions are being shut down the same way. That's a weird thing. Also, and I sent you the article earlier, Canada was the one that released all these sex predators out of jail because they didn't want them to catch COVID. Like, wait, and these weren't just bad dudes that, got caught with a prostitute. We're talking about bad guys. They let out some really nasty fellows back in the general population because they didn't want them to catch the flu. Like that's not consistent. But you'll arrest a pastor who's just having church service. That's just not consistent. And so when people see that, I think that's where we're like, wait, how does this Romans 13 play out? Because it's hard to say, follow the government, Romans 13, when you see this kind of stuff where literally sex offenders are being let back out on the street. That's just not cool.
Well, by the way, I didn't notice it before, but Erin Coates is on here. That's Pastor Coates' wife, and she agreed with you, Jason, that without the legislative process, no checks. And that's actually, again, that's part of our system. We're supposed to be a system of checks and balances, and they're supposed to be following their own precedent that they have set, the thing that they've established as a government. So yeah, that's a good point. By the way, I also said hello to Julie specifically because that's my wife. So she must have popped on.
Now, Matt asked a good question. Hey, Matt Prill said, hey, I'm late to the show, but does Romans 13 also apply to holding the government to uphold its own laws, such as our freedom to worship? I think so. I believe, especially our representative government that we currently have here in the United States. I'm assuming Matt is in the US. Yeah, that's the part of our system is that we hold our people, our elected officials, nobody's above the law. Even our governors, our mayors, our president is under the law. So they're supposed to be lawful. So I do believe that applies there as well. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, the thing I would say about all this, people, it is a hard thing. I will admit it's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. It gets complicated because when people read Romans 13, they just take it very simply. It says, be submissive to the governing authorities, but it doesn't tell you the specifics of your government. And so we always have to apply scripture to our context. And yes, being respectful, I think Pastor James Coates really sought to demonstrate respect. And, like you said, he even actually turned himself in. But the kind of government that we have is not exactly the same, for example, as the Roman government. Obviously, we don't have an emperor here, and they had a very different system. The kind of system that we have, we should be respectful. And I do think some people take it too far the other way. I think some people are overly inclined to just find a reason not to follow whatever the government is saying or to be highly suspicious. But we have a government that is supposed to be accountable to its own system. And that's why, again, we have checks and balances. That's the kind of government we are under, that God has ordained for where we happen to live. So I think we do need to obey Romans 13, but obey Romans 13 in the context of the government that God has placed you under. And how to apply that, that takes wisdom. And that's why we're talking about it, because it does take wisdom to think through these things.
I'll pick a fight here. just for, again, I said, I'm going to speak to the Romans 13 people, not to disagree with them, not to not be brothers and sisters in Christ, but I just want us to think about it. Let's say that there's a church community in a very hostile very hostile country where Christianity is illegal. It's illegal to be a Christian. You will be persecuted and real persecution, maybe even killed because you are a Christian. Now, the law in this land is thou shalt not be a Christian. You cannot worship Christ. You cannot, it's literally on their books. What would you tell them to do? Would you tell them to submit to the government? Well, no, we would say, no, it's better that you follow after what God has told you to do. Again, Acts 5. So we have to look at them in context. And again, here in the United States, we're not that bad, as my pitiful example is. But I think after 2020, I don't think we should ever say, oh, it can't get that bad. I think we should all be like, yeah, it could possibly. And we might need to be a little bit more mindful of it. So that's just my 2 cents to make a dollar.
Okay. Now, are there any other things you wanted to share? I know you had some different articles. We can put some articles in the video description later so people can read some things for themselves. Anything you wanted to point out there?
No, it's just those, again, just I felt like I did a quick review of some of the things that were happening in Canada with, sex offenders and major criminals being let out of jail because they didn't want them to get COVID, from mosques and synagogues not being closed. Now, granted, I will say the article that I read said that the mosques and synagogues were following the prescribed, were in the beginning were following the prescribed capacity requests of the state. Okay, fine. Okay, whatever. That's kind of like Kroger to me. Okay, whatever. That's the same thing. They're not under the same. And I thought this article was interesting because it's like these imams and priests are like asking Grace Life Church to comply with the state. I just thought that was adorable. I just said, like, wow, who are we following here? Who did you think we were following? We're not following after you. We're certainly not following after the state. Y'all do what you're going to do. And you just do that. But I do think it's cute, though, that this is right at the beginning of Ramadan. So I'm wondering I wonder if those mosques really, truly stayed with that, not seat arrangement, but those capacity arrangements. But I saw some things that said that they didn't, even after this.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, context of where you live makes a difference. Yes. Where I live in New Hampshire, we don't really have any mosques like in my particular area. So we're really dealing much more here with just secularism is really the big thing we deal with here more than anything. So that's interesting.
So yeah, I think, just again, not to disagree or fight with any of our brothers and sisters that, that are holding to Romans 13. I do think I would love for us to say, hey, you know what? I think you should follow the law, but I can support you. And I don't want you to be in jail. I mean, I just want believers to agree that, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't agree with the way Art Pawlowski is handling it. But boy, I don't think he needs to be in jail either. I feel like sometimes like, man, how can we not even agree on this? Like the man is in jail for opening his church. And we can always double back to the question of, is the virus as bad as they've made it sound? And I think that's part of, I've heard that argument from Mrs. Coates. I've heard that argument from countless other people that is not even as bad as what they're saying. So we're not even, so when people like to use the bubonic plague as a comparison, it's not the bubonic plague, just stop it. So I just want us to agree, like, man, I would like for Art Pawlowski to follow the law. Okay, fine. But I also don't want to be in jail either. I don't think that's right. It's wrong for them to put him in jail for nothing more than just preaching and open up his church. And I just would love for Christians to, be able to at least side on that end instead of being divided even on that. And I think the last article I sent you was from the Gospel Coalition of Canada. I just thought this was really wow. I just, do you have that one?
Yeah, I'll try to pull that up as well in a second here.
Yeah, I just thought
So
that one was really odd. Like, wow. And
yeah,
so, and
I
this
think
was
you
not
mean
the,
this one right here.
uh, yep. Yeah. And I just really found this article to be troubling. The gentleman really takes great pains to say basically that no Canadian pastors are being mistreated or ill-treated, I think he's what he said, in Canada. Like, how does, and he's not terribly far from Edmonton. Like, how are you even saying this? Like, wow, how are you so, are, that right there just really took my breath away. Like, basically, that um, my guy here, Paul, is really trying to make the case that um, this isn't any kind of persecution. They're not being mistreated. Um, Even, and I want to say, a few days after this article comes out, that's when Art Pawlowski is arrested in the street. Before that, probably 2 weeks before that, that's when Grace Life was locked down. Like, man, and this is the Gospel Coalition, not the random baseball team coalition. This is supposed to be the Gospel Coalition. And they, to me, they undercut any efforts that Christians are making and saying that we are not non-essential, that we are, the church is essential for body of believers. But they undercut it and make it sound like it's of no consequence. It's the same thing as going to Ace Hardware or Dunkin' Donuts. Like, man, and you're supposed to be the Gospel Coalition.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think, this is where I tend to be pretty open-minded about how Christians can look at things different ways. And what I'm reading here, and I did read some earlier, and this jumped out at me. He says, after all, many churches were forced to temporarily suspend their main large group gathering and normal Christian activities, such as singing, taking communion, sharing a meal together, with either strongly discouraged or forbidden outright. Doesn't that qualify as persecution? It certainly qualifies as unusual hardship, but in most cases, it probably did not rise to the level of formal persecution. I got the sense that he's not necessarily ruling it out that in every single case there's no persecution, but I do think he's pushing back on the idea that there's just this targeting of all churches. Because I think it might even be here that he talks about gyms and how the government has been very restrictive on gyms, where people go and they exercise. So it hasn't just been churches. I know you want to say something, and I know you're feisty, Jason. We've got feisty Jason tonight. But and I see someone here is saying you can't trust the Gospel Coalition anymore. I know that yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff out there, and there's more than just this issue. One other thing I'll say, and then I'll let Jason, let out all that he wants to say here. But I think the Gospel Coalition has a lot of different people in it. So I'll give you one example. D.A. Carson. I really like D.A. Carson. I think he's great. I love his writing. Everything I've seen of him is quite good. So this is just one person. I think I get it. It is an organization, and I understand why some people have been critical of some other things they've done. But as far as how they look at persecution, this is just one person's opinion. And, we do have a right to give an opinion. Go ahead.
Oh, no question about it. I want him to share his opinion because now I know where Paul Carter actually sits. So now I know, like, as Aaron pointed out, I want to go read other articles that he's posted. I just didn't have time to do that. But I think it doesn't really matter if it's persecution. And I'm going to paraphrase James Coates from some while ago. He doesn't care that it's persecution. That's not our lane. I don't think it's persecution because if we were in China, they wouldn't think this was persecution. If we were in Iran or a Muslim country, they wouldn't think this was persecution either. So I'm not trying to say that it's persecution. Is it some kind of preferential treatment for churches? I think there is valid point there for that. That there's some unevenness, uneven weights and measures. And I don't care if gyms were shut down. Okay, nobody cares. I'm not even, it doesn't even matter. Church is different. And I've said that before. I will not stop saying it. Church is different than a gym. Church is different than grocery store or a sporting event or a concert. So I'm not going to even play the game of, well, if gyms are open, churches should be open. No, I don't care, because churches should be open, period. So that's where, and I think, so to his point, or rather, I understand. I don't know if it's persecution. I really don't. But I do know that it's uneven treatment, and therein is the problem. And I think it shows that there is a propensity, and when we take all these situations that we've seen, from the arrests, from fencing off to fines and everything else, we put it together like, man, this is starting to look a lot like some kind of, whether maybe it's not persecution, person bothering or person annoying, I don't know, but it's not Christ-like, and that's all I'm saying. So,
Yeah.
Jason out.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm seeing, again, Pastor Coates' wife, Erin, here giving some comments and just reading what she's saying here about how specific churches, there are other churches open in the city that weren't targeted. So that's interesting. And then also she wrote they paid churches that abided by the restrictions $20,000. So I think this is where, again, your context, it comes into play here, your specific context. And so when you think about, is the church being targeted? Is it under persecution? It depends on where you live. and so I would love for Erin Coates, if she's still watching, I'd love for Erin to come on sometime with us to explain a little more specifically about their context and some of the things she's talking about here, because I understand it a little bit, but I don't understand it fully. But I trust that pastors are trying to do their best to honor the Lord. Someone like Pastor James Coates, I've always supported the fact that I know he's trying to honor the Lord, and he's dealing with a specific church in a specific place. And so he knows best, as well as the elders there, yes, what they need to do in order to be faithful in the way that God has called them. And so it would be great to hear specifically from Erin, and she's saying for sure. So I think she's willing to come on with us, Jason, sometime. That'll be great. And I'm really glad that, yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Okay, I'm picking, and to build off of what you're saying, I trust that a pastor who has given his life to serve and shepherd a body of believers that God has called him to, if they were really, truly stacking bodies up like lasagna in the street, that pastor would make some hard choices with the elders, with the deacons, of how to keep these people safe. I have no doubt in my heart. I don't know James Coates personally. I don't know Artur Pawlowski personally. I've never met John MacArthur. The countless other faithful pastors that are represented on this live stream. I do not doubt that any of them would say, oh, we got to do something different because people are literally dying in the streets. I don't believe that they would put people in reckless harm. And for us to keep treating this as if they were literally dying in the street by walking into the church, stop it. Stop that. That's not being honest. And I've said it before, Christians have to be people who are honest and deal with things in an honest manner and say, okay, fine. If you're scared or you're fearful of COVID, there's nothing wrong with that. Be fearful. But don't be mad at your church and disparage and slander them that they're killing people. Come on, man, stop that. I mean, and to fly in the face of it, the Atlanta Braves just had their opening season game last week, and they didn't have any restrictions. Everybody was shoulder to shoulder. And I mean, and the cute thing about it is my church is 5 miles from the Braves Stadium.
And I bet, Jason, I bet they were singing even in the seventh inning, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game."
Take me
They
out
were
to the
even
ball game.
singing.
And they were. So the idea that on Sunday my church should not be at full capacity or sitting however they want to, but 5 miles away you were able to have the Braves. Have Braves fans shoulder to shoulder, drinking, singing, eating food, and all that kind of stuff like that. Miss me with that. I will be there singing on Sunday. Holla at your boy. So as off key as I am. So I just want them to just like stop being inconsistent. And okay.
Yeah. So we're gonna wind this conversation down because we've been going at it and talking about a lot of good things. I do want to say, Jason, this is fortuitous you brought up the Braves because the Toronto Blue Jays just, I think, swept the Braves. So thank you, Toronto Blue Jays, for doing that. Now I would like the Blue Jays to start playing badly for a few games while they play against the Phillies. And I'm curious what other sports people follow. So as we start to wind down the conversation, if you have other sports that you like, leave that in the comments. And it's been interesting, Jason. As you know, I'm collecting all these baseball hats. And someone from Japan told me that they plan to send me a Japanese team baseball hat.
What kind of team is that?
I don't know, because I probably wouldn't know how to pronounce it, even if they told me the team. But they like Japanese teams out there. So they're going to send me a Japanese baseball team hat. So now my hat collection is going international.
Your hats are international. I might want one of those now. I don't even watch baseball. I might want a cool, what's called hat.
All right. Well, I think that was good, Jason, and I appreciate everybody joining us. It's always really good to have conversations with Jason, but adding in this chat is a bonus, isn't it?
I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. And by the way, I mentioned it to Jason too. I do have the ability at some point here to add super chat. So we'll talk about that, toy around with that. But I know Jason, he wants to announce the super chats.
I just always think that's cool, man. Come on. I just thought that's cool when people say that.
That's right.
You know what? Before we leave though, Tim, I got to ask you a question. Our new segment.
Go ahead.
Hey, Tim, what are you reading?
All right. Well, with my children, I'm reading a classic book, and now I can't think of the name. Very memorable. No, but it's funny because I do read to my daughters at night, my youngest daughters, and there was this movie years ago that I saw as a child, and it was a really nice animated feature. And I'm trying to think what it's called. The main character is Milo, and he goes to a place called Dictionopolis. So, the Phantom Toll Booth. I finally remembered it. The Phantom Toll Booth is what I'm reading, Jason, to my kids.
Okay.
But I have recently read some of John Piper's expository exaltation. So if you're a preacher or you're someone who wants to get some theology on preaching, John Piper always, digs into things. And so that was good. And then I like to read a variety of things. So I actually have a book that I'm going through by Scott Adams, who's a cartoonist, and he's funny. And it's called it's something like how to fail at almost everything and still win big, even if you're failing a lot, it doesn't mean that you're not making progress.
I love it. Well, I'm just reading On Grace and Free Will by St. Augustine. I'm still doing my one book a week for the whole year. So this is my 22nd book. I think somehow or another I got a little bit ahead, so that's good. But it's my 22nd book for the year, and it's just Augustine making the point of the comparison between free will, whether it be man chooses God, and grace. God gives us the ability to choose him. So he's making that case. And if you know Augustine, he spends a little, he can take one sentence and drag it out into a paragraph. So it's a long read, but I'm enjoying it. And that's it. And my kids are reading
So,
something, but we're not reading anything together. So
oh,
next time I'll try to have something with them.
yeah, I'd like to hear what you're reading with the kids. That'd be cool. Yeah, so Jason's reading a book a week. So every week that we ask, he's going to have a different book, but I'm going to have the same book probably for a few weeks because I don't read that fast.
Okay, I can tell you what I'm going to be reading next week. Okay, this is interesting. As many of you know, by political party, I'm a libertarian. But I've been challenged by many of my brothers and sisters because libertarians are a little bit, well, shall we say, they have a bad reputation. So one of the things that libertarians are always point out about libertarians is the party that wants to legalize weed. So actually, I got a book by Douglas Wilson called Devoured by Cannabis, and he's explaining why Christians should not be for cannabis. I was never actually for it, but it does. It does.
What's that plant in the background, Jason?
That's my coworker, man. That's my coworker back there, man. Okay. In my office. Don't be talking about my coworker. So anyway, hey, that was a good conversation, Tim.
Thank you, Jason. And we will plan in the near future, maybe next week, we'll get to do another live chat with you all. But thank you all for joining us tonight and putting your comments in the live chat. That's really, really wonderful to interact with all of you. And we'll talk again with Jason before long. Bye, Jason.
Absolutely. Hey, take care, Tim. Grace and peace.
Thank you.